Commander Sarah Chen stood in the docking bay of Station Kepler 442 and watched as the massive doors sealed behind her ship with a hiss that echoed through the cavernous space like a whisper from some ancient giant. The air here tasted different from Earth's atmosphere, cleaner somehow, processed and filtered through systems that had served thousands of alien species over countless years, and she found herself taking deeper breaths just to feel like she was getting enough oxygen, even though the readouts on her suit confirmed the mixture was perfectly adequate for human biology. The welcoming committee approached, with movements that seemed choreographed, yet alien in ways Sarah couldn't quite define. There were 3 of them, representing different species from the Galactic Collective, and each moved with the careful precision of diplomats who had done this ceremony hundreds of times before, with races from across multiple star systems and galactic arms. The leader was tall and reed-thin, with skin that shimmered between blue and silver, depending on how the station's lights hit the surface. 2 additional limbs extended from what Sarah thought of as shoulders, giving the alien 4 arms total, and when it spoke, the words came from a translator device that hung around what might have been a neck, or might have been something else entirely. Welcome, human. We are pleased to begin the assessment protocols that will determine how your species joins our community of spacefaring civilizations. Sarah stepped forward and extended her hand in the human greeting gesture they had practiced during the 6-month journey from Earth. Ambassador Thren looked at the hand for a long moment before one of its 4 limbs reached out and brushed against her fingers with a touch so light it barely registered. Clearly this species had different ideas about appropriate contact force between strangers. "Thank you for receiving us," Sarah said, and kept her voice steady, despite the nervous energy thrumming through her chest. This was it, the moment humanity had dreamed about since the first telescope pointed at distant stars, since the first story about life beyond Earth was told around ancient fires. We are honored to be here and ready to complete whatever assessments are required. The second alien moved forward on 6 legs that clicked against the metal floor with a rhythm that sounded almost musical. Its body was segmented like an insect, but covered in what looked like polished armor that reflected the station lights in prismatic patterns. And from a head that featured too many eyes to count easily came another translated voice. "I am Dr. Ven, Chief Medical Officer for Integration Protocols," the voice explained, with what Sarah interpreted as professional courtesy. "All new species must undergo baseline physical assessments before we can manufacture appropriate safety equipment and life support systems. The process is routine and has been completed successfully by over 14,000 species across 3 galactic arms without incident or complication." Sarah nodded and gestured to the 5 other humans in her delegation, who stood in a neat line behind her. They had been chosen carefully for this mission, representatives from different continents and ethnic backgrounds, different body types and ages, all trained in first contact protocols and diplomatic procedures that Earth's governments had spent decades developing, based on nothing but speculation and hope. "We understand," Sarah said. "Our medical teams prepared us during the journey. We're ready to participate in whatever tests you need." Dr. Ven's compound eyes seemed to glitter with something that might have been satisfaction, or might have been an entirely alien emotion with no human equivalent. The translator couldn't convey emotional subtext, only words, so Sarah had to rely on body language she barely understood. "Excellent," Dr. Ven said, and began moving toward a corridor that branched off from the main docking bay. "Please follow me to the assessment center. The tests are non-invasive and will take approximately 4 standard cycles to complete. I believe that translates to roughly 6 of your Earth hours." The delegation followed Dr. Ven through corridors that curved in ways that didn't quite make sense to human spatial reasoning. The station was enormous, built to accommodate species of wildly different sizes and environmental needs. And everywhere Sarah looked, she saw evidence of alien engineering that made Earth's most advanced technology look like primitive tools by comparison. They passed other beings in the corridors, creatures that floated rather than walked, beings covered in fur or scales or substances that defied easy categorization, entities that communicated with flashing lights or chemical signals that Sarah's translator couldn't even attempt to interpret. Each one paused to observe the human delegation with expressions or gestures or sensory organ orientations that might have meant curiosity or concern or complete indifference. The assessment center turned out to be a large circular room with white walls that seemed to glow with their own internal light. Equipment lined the perimeter. Devices whose functions Sarah could only guess at based on their vague resemblance to medical scanners she had seen in Earth hospitals. Though these were clearly far more advanced and designed to work with biology that might be carbon-based or silicon-based or something else entirely beyond human biochemistry. "We will begin with basic physical measurements," Dr. Venn explained, and gestured with one of its limbs toward a platform in the center of the room. "Please, Commander Chen, step onto the scanner so we can establish baseline readings for bone density, muscle composition, and neural structure." Sarah walked to the platform and stood where Dr. Venn indicated. Immediately, she felt a tingling sensation wash over her skin as invisible scanners swept her body from multiple angles, reading her biological structure in ways she couldn't perceive, but could somehow sense at the edge of awareness. Dr. Venn's assistant, a smaller version of the same species, with slightly different coloring on its armored segments, worked at a control panel that displayed information in symbols Sarah didn't recognize. The assistant made soft clicking sounds that might have been communication, or might have been the biological equivalent of humming while working. "Bone density readings are," Dr. Venn paused, and the translator went silent for a moment before continuing, "higher than expected. This is not cause for concern, merely notation for our records." Sarah stepped down from the platform when Dr. Venn gestured for her to move. The next test involved a different kind of scanner that measured something the translator called neural pathway efficiency, which Sarah interpreted as reaction time testing. The process continued with various measurements and assessments. Each one met with small pauses from Dr. Venn and its assistant as they reviewed results that apparently didn't quite match their expectations. Sarah began to wonder if human biology was more unusual than Earth scientists had predicted, though nothing in the aliens' demeanor suggested actual concern. Finally, Dr. Venn approached a table where a device sat waiting. It looked deceptively simple, like a bar made of dark metal with sensor pads along its surface that glowed with soft blue light. "This is the standard grip strength calibrator," Dr. Venn explained, with the tone of someone who had given this explanation thousands of times. "It measures the force your appendages can generate, which helps us design appropriate tools and equipment. The device will first establish a baseline reading by scanning your hand's electromagnetic field and muscle tension patterns. Then we will ask you to grip it with various levels of force." Sarah nodded and approached the table. The device sat there innocently, just another piece of testing equipment in a day full of assessments and measurements. "Simply rest your hand above the sensor pad," Dr. Venn instructed. "Do not grip yet. We need the calibration reading first from your relaxed state." Sarah extended her right hand and held it palm down about 2 centimeters above the device's surface. She kept her muscles loose and relaxed, thinking about nothing except maintaining the hovering position while the sensors did whatever they needed to do. The device began to hum softly, and then the entire room exploded with sound and light as every alarm in the assessment center activated simultaneously. The shrieking alarms made Sarah jerk her hand back instinctively as red warning lights began strobing throughout the assessment center and casting everything in alternating shadow and crimson illumination that made the white walls look like they were bleeding. She stumbled backward and nearly collided with Lieutenant Marcus Webb, who had been standing behind her, observing the testing process. Dr. Ven's compound eyes seemed to bulge outward in a way that Sarah's brain interpreted as horror or shock, or perhaps some combination of emotions that humans didn't have specific words for. The insectoid alien rushed to the control panel, where its assistant was already frantically manipulating displays that showed cascading error messages in symbols and colors that shifted too quickly for Sarah to track. "What happened?" Sarah shouted over the alarms, her heart hammering against her ribs with the spike of adrenaline that came from sudden, unexpected chaos. "I didn't even touch it." "Precisely," Dr. Venn said, and the translator somehow managed to convey what sounded like existential dread, despite the mechanical nature of the voice reproduction. The device registered catastrophic readings beyond maximum threshold parameters. "This should be impossible. The calibrator is designed to measure grip strength capable of crushing starship hull plating. Yet it was overwhelmed by mere proximity to your resting hand." The assistant made rapid clicking sounds that grew higher in pitch, clearly agitated. It gestured at one of the displays, with multiple limbs, moving in what seemed like panic. "The electromagnetic signature from your nervous system alone exceeded our sensor's capacity," Dr. Venn continued, while working at the controls. "The microscopic muscle tension in your relaxed state, what you consider zero exertion, generated readings that match what our strongest warrior castes produce during maximum combat performance." Sarah stared at her hand like it had suddenly become a foreign object attached to her arm. It looked completely normal to her. 5 fingers, standard human proportions, slightly calloused from her training regimen, but otherwise unremarkable in every possible way she could imagine. "That can't be right," Lieutenant Webb said from behind Sarah, his voice tight with confusion. "Commander Chen is fit, but she's not. I mean, none of us are superhuman. We're just regular people who pass the astronaut physical requirements." The alarms finally cut off as Dr. Venn managed to silence them, leaving a ringing silence that felt almost worse than the noise. The red warning lights continued their strobing pattern, while the assistant worked to shut down the malfunctioning calibration device, which had begun sparking from one of its sensor arrays in a way that looked distinctly unhealthy for alien technology. Heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor outside, and a moment later, the assessment center doors burst open. 6 beings entered wearing what was clearly security armor, dark plates that covered bodies ranging from vaguely humanoid to completely alien in structure, and each carried what Sarah's military training recognized as weapons, despite their unfamiliar designs. The lead security officer was a squat creature, maybe half Sarah's height, but 3 times as wide, with thick limbs and a head that sat directly on massive shoulders without any visible neck. Its skin looked like living stone, gray and textured, and when it spoke, the translator gave it a voice like grinding rocks. "Isolation protocol initiated," the security officer announced. "All subjects will remain stationary while we assess the threat. Dr. Venn, report status." "There is no threat," Dr. Venn said quickly, while gesturing with multiple limbs in what might have been a calming motion. "Equipment malfunction during routine calibration. The humans have done nothing wrong. Equipment malfunction severe enough to trigger station-wide crisis alerts," the security officer countered, skepticism clear even through the translation. "Explain how standard testing equipment experiences catastrophic failure without external interference or sabotage." Sarah raised both hands slowly, palms forward in a universal gesture she hoped translated as non-threatening. The security team's weapons remained pointed in her general direction, not quite aimed, but ready to adjust at the first sign of danger. "We'll cooperate fully," Sarah said, and kept her voice calm, despite the tension crackling through the room, like static electricity. "We want to understand what happened as much as you do." Dr. Venn moved to one of the undamaged displays and began pulling up data, projecting holographic readouts that floated in the air between the security team and the human delegation. Sarah couldn't read the symbols, but she could see graphs and charts that spiked dramatically. Lines climbing off the top of their scales into error territories, marked in aggressive warning colors. "Look at the readings," Dr. Venn said, and gestured at the floating data. The calibration device was functioning perfectly until the moment of proximity to human biology. "I propose we test the other humans in the delegation to determine if this is an individual anomaly or a species-wide characteristic." The security officer's rocky face didn't change expression. Sarah wasn't sure it could, but something in its posture shifted slightly toward what might have been grudging agreement. "Proceed," the officer said, "but under observation. My team will remain present." Dr. Venn turned to the human delegation, and Sarah saw something new in the alien's compound eyes. A cautious curiosity mixed with what she could only interpret as scientific fascination, tinged with fear. "Lieutenant Webb," Dr. Venn said, "would you approach the secondary calibration device?" Webb glanced at Sarah, and she gave him a small nod. He was younger than her by 5 years, fresh-faced and enthusiastic about being chosen for humanity's first diplomatic mission, and right now he looked like he was trying very hard not to show how nervous the security presence made him. The assistant brought out another device identical to the first and placed it on a different table. Webb approached and held his hand above the sensor pad, just as Sarah had done. The alarms triggered again, immediately. This time the device didn't just spark, it actually shattered. Pieces of alien technology flew across the room as internal components overloaded and failed catastrophically, sending the assistant scrambling backward, while Dr. Venn made high-pitched clicking sounds that the translator interpreted as alarmed exclamations. "Impossible," Dr. Venn said while staring at the wreckage. "Lieutenant Webb appears even less physically developed than Commander Chen based on visual assessment. Yet his readings were marginally higher. How can this be?" Sarah felt a cold realization settling into her stomach, like ice water. Something was fundamentally different about humans compared to the galactic average. Something so dramatic that their mere presence was breaking equipment designed to measure the strongest beings the collective had ever encountered across thousands of worlds and millions of years. "Test all of them," the security officer commanded. "I want complete data before we proceed further." Over the next hour, each member of the human delegation was tested with new calibration devices that Dr. Venn's assistant kept bringing from storage. Each test ended the same way: catastrophic equipment failure, alarms, error readings that climbed beyond measurable parameters. Dr. Zhang, their linguist specialist, broke 3 devices. Ensign Okafor, their youngest member at only 23 years old, destroyed 4 before Dr. Venn stopped trying. Even Dr. Patel, their medical officer who was 62 and described herself as desperately out of shape, managed to overwhelm sensors that had successfully measured species capable of bending steel with their bare appendages. By the time they finished, 12 calibration devices lay in pieces, and Dr. Venn was making continuous clicking sounds while manipulating displays that showed data streams Sarah couldn't begin to interpret. The security team had moved from hostile readiness to something closer to wary respect, their weapons now pointing at the floor instead of toward the humans. "I must summon the Xenobiology Council," Dr. Venn finally said. "This is beyond standard integration assessment protocols. We need specialist analysis immediately." "What does this mean?" Sarah asked, though part of her was afraid she already knew the answer. Dr. Venn's compound eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made Sarah's skin prickle with instinctive unease. "It means," Dr. Venn said slowly, "that either your species is fundamentally different from every other spacefaring race in the collective's records, or our understanding of what is biologically possible needs to be completely revised." The Xenobiology Council chamber was far more impressive than the assessment center. The room stretched upward for what must have been 30 meters, with curved walls covered in displays showing star systems and planetary data from across the galaxy. And the seating arrangement accommodated at least 50 different body types, ranging from beings that required aquatic environments enclosed in clear tanks, to creatures that seemed to exist partially out of phase with normal space. Sarah sat in what the station crew had hastily designated as human-appropriate furniture. Basically a bench that was too hard and slightly the wrong height, but functional enough, while 12 of the collective's foremost xenobiologists examined holographic displays that showed every piece of data humanity had provided during the initial diplomatic exchanges. The lead xenobiologist was a being that looked like it was made entirely of crystalline structures that refracted light into rainbow patterns. It had no visible sensory organs that Sarah could identify, yet somehow it perceived the world around it and spoke through a translator mounted on a floating drone that followed it everywhere. "We have reviewed the environmental data from your homeworld," the crystalline being said, and its translated voice carried harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache slightly. "The information you provided was assumed to be diplomatic exaggeration or translation error. No species could evolve under such conditions and achieve spaceflight capability." "I assure you the data is accurate," Sarah said carefully. "Earth's conditions are normal for us. We don't know anything different." Another xenobiologist spoke up. This one resembled a tree more than an animal, with bark-like skin and branches that moved with deliberate purpose instead of limbs. It gestured at a holographic display showing Earth rotating slowly in the air between them. "Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world, according to collective environmental standards," the tree being said. "Class 12 is theoretical. We have never discovered complex life on worlds meeting those criteria, because our models predict such life cannot exist." Sarah glanced at Lieutenant Webb, who sat beside her. He looked as confused as she felt, neither of them understanding what made Earth so unusual in galactic terms. "What specifically makes Earth a death world?" Webb asked. The crystalline lead xenobiologist manipulated the holographic display, and Earth statistics began appearing in text that the translator helpfully rendered into English. Sarah read the data and felt her confusion deepen, because everything looked normal to her. "Your gravitational force is 40% higher than the galactic average for habitable worlds," the lead xenobiologist explained. "Most spacefaring species evolved on planets with approximately 0.7 of your gravity. Your people have been living your entire existence under crushing force that would cripple the majority of collective citizens." Sarah looked down at her hands again. She had never thought of Earth's gravity as particularly strong, because she had nothing to compare it to, no reference point except what human scientists considered normal. "Your atmospheric composition contains 21% oxygen," another xenobiologist added. This one was basically a floating jellyfish enclosed in a hovering containment field. For most species, oxygen concentrations above 8% are considered toxic. "You breathe an atmosphere that would kill us through oxidative damage to cellular structures within hours. The temperature variations on your planet's surface range from -40 to +50 on your Celsius scale," the tree being continued. "These fluctuations would be classified as uninhabitable extremes. Most garden worlds maintain surface temperatures within a 15-degree range. Your people evolved to survive in conditions we would describe as everything from frozen death to boiling apocalypse." The holographic display shifted to show weather patterns across Earth's surface. Sarah watched storms form and dissipate. Hurricanes spin across oceans. Blizzards blanket continents in white. "Your weather systems regularly generate what we classify as localized extinction events," the crystalline being said, and something in its harmonics suggested deep unease. "Hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, earthquakes, these occur with frequency that would render most worlds uninhabitable. Yet your species builds permanent structures and simply accepts occasional destruction as normal." Webb leaned forward, and Sarah could see his analytical mind working through the implications. But these are just environmental conditions, Webb said. How does this relate to our physical capabilities? Dr. Venn stepped forward from where it had been observing the proceedings. The insectoid medical officer's compound eyes reflected the holographic light in prismatic patterns. Evolution responds to environmental pressure, Dr. Venn explained. Your species developed under constant assault from your planet's hostile conditions. Every system in your biology optimized for survival in an environment that would kill most collective species within days. The displays shifted again, this time showing comparison data between humans and various alien species. Sarah saw anatomical diagrams, cellular structures, metabolic processes laid out side by side. Your bone density is 3 times galactic average, Dr. Venn continued. This developed to support your bodies under crushing gravity. Your muscle fiber composition allows force generation that matches our strongest warrior castes, who achieve such capability only through genetic modification and cybernetic enhancement. Your healing speed, another xenobiologist interjected, its form resembling an octopus, but with too many tentacles and eyes that glowed with bioluminescence, is faster than our intensive medical care can achieve. You recover from injuries that would permanently disable most species, and you do this naturally, without technological intervention. Sarah thought about scraped knees healing in days, broken bones mending in weeks, cuts sealing themselves within hours. She had always assumed this was just how bodies worked, never imagining it was extraordinary. Your immune system treats our most dangerous pathogens as minor nuisances, the tree being added. Earth's biosphere is so aggressively hostile that everything evolved to kill everything else. Your immune response developed to handle thousands of lethal threats simultaneously. You carry antibodies for diseases that would extinction event entire planets in our collective. The crystalline lead xenobiologist made the holographic display zoom in on human cellular structures, showing microscopic details that Sarah barely understood. Your stress tolerance and pain threshold exceed what other species achieve only under combat drugs, it said. Your adrenal system floods your body with performance-enhancing compounds during threat response. You can operate at peak efficiency while injured in ways that would render others unconscious from shock. Even your reaction time, Dr. Venn gestured at neural pathway diagrams, approaches the theoretical maximum for biological organisms. You process threats and respond faster than beings who evolved as predator species on worlds we classify as moderately dangerous. Sarah sat back and tried to process what she was hearing. Everything the xenobiologist described sounded like humans were some kind of engineered super soldiers. Yet she knew the truth was far simpler. Humans were just normal people who evolved on Earth, doing normal Earth things. So what you're saying, Webb said slowly, is that Earth is so dangerous that just surviving there made us into something the rest of the galaxy considers impossible? Not impossible, the crystalline being corrected. You clearly exist. Impossible is the wrong term. Perhaps unprecedented is more accurate. Another xenobiologist spoke from across the chamber. Something that looked like it was made of living liquid, contained in a vaguely humanoid-shaped force field. We must understand what this means for integration, the liquid being said. Your resting state, what you consider zero exertion, represents physical capability that exceeds what our strongest security forces achieve at maximum performance. You could theoretically tear through our barriers and armor, without intending harm, simply by moving with what you consider normal force. Sarah felt her stomach drop as the implications hit her fully. Humanity had come to the stars hoping to find their place among advanced civilizations, imagining they would be the newcomers learning from wiser older races. Instead, they were discovering they were terrifying to everyone else. We mean no harm, Sarah said, and heard the desperation in her own voice. We came here for peaceful contact and cooperation. We do not doubt your intentions, the crystalline lead xenobiologist replied. But intentions matter less than capability when discussing safety protocols. Your species represents a category of biological potential we have never encountered. You are living weapons who evolved naturally rather than being engineered for war. Dr. Venn approached Sarah's bench and made a gesture with one of its limbs that might have been sympathetic. The council must decide how to proceed, Dr. Venn said gently. But I want you to understand, you are not monsters. You are survivors from a world that should not support complex life, yet somehow produced a species capable of reaching the stars, despite every obstacle your planet placed before you. Sarah asked, "What happens now?" The crystalline being's light patterns shifted in ways Sarah couldn't interpret. "Now," it said, "we determine whether the galaxy is ready for humanity, or whether humanity is too much for the galaxy to handle." News of humanity's assessment results spread through Station Kepler 442's diplomatic channels faster than Sarah expected. Within 6 hours of the Xenobiology Council's preliminary findings, representatives from 40 different species had requested emergency sessions to discuss the human situation, and the station's communication networks buzzed with traffic as governments across 3 galactic arms demanded information about the Death World species that had just arrived on the scene. Sarah found herself confined to diplomatic quarters that were comfortable but clearly monitored. Surveillance was subtle but present in every corner, and whenever she or her delegation members moved through the station's corridors, they were accompanied by security details that tried to look casual while maintaining careful distance. The various species' reactions fell into predictable categories, according to the briefings Ambassador Thren provided during daily update sessions. Roughly 30% wanted strict quarantine protocols that would keep humans away from major population centers until more data could be gathered. Another 30% saw potential military applications and were already submitting formal alliance proposals to Earth's governments through standard diplomatic channels. And the remaining 40% split between paranoid factions who considered humanity an extinction-level threat, and curious scientists who wanted extensive study opportunities. What surprised Sarah most was discovering that humans had become subjects of intense observation, simply by existing normally. The station's xenobiology teams had set up monitoring stations that tracked everything from sleep patterns to casual conversation, documenting what they called baseline human behavior in non-threatening conditions. Dr. Venn visited the diplomatic quarters regularly, always accompanied by an assistant carrying portable scanning equipment that recorded data Sarah couldn't see, but could definitely feel tingling across her skin whenever the devices activated. "Your healing speed continues to exceed our models," Dr. Venn said during one visit while examining readouts from scans taken the previous day. Lieutenant Webb scraped his knuckle on a doorframe yesterday morning. The injury has already sealed completely and entered final regeneration phase. This would take our physicians 3 days to achieve with advanced tissue regeneration therapy. Webb looked at his hand and shrugged. The scrape had been minor, barely worth noticing. "It was just a scratch," Webb said. "Exactly," Dr. Venn replied. "You dismiss as trivial what we classify as requiring medical intervention." The observations continued. Ensign Okafor's immune system fighting off what the station doctors described as a particularly aggressive pathogen that had somehow breached environmental controls. She experienced mild sniffles for 6 hours, while the alien medical staff prepared for catastrophic systemic failure that never came. Dr. Patel casually lifting equipment that the station's maintenance crew required mechanical assistance to move, doing it without thinking because 60 kilograms felt light to someone who had spent 62 years under Earth's gravity. Dr. Zhang reacting to a dropped tray in the cafeteria by catching 3 falling containers before they hit the ground, moving so fast that station security initially thought she had used some kind of technological enhancement. Every mundane human action became evidence of capabilities the collective found remarkable or terrifying, depending on perspective. Sarah tried to maintain diplomatic composure while feeling increasingly like a zoo animal being studied by visitors who couldn't decide if she was fascinating or dangerous. Probably she was both, which made the whole situation more complicated. Ambassador Thren scheduled regular meetings, where Sarah provided Earth's official positions on various proposals and concerns, walking the careful line between reassuring the nervous species and not appearing weak to the aggressive ones. It was exhausting work, made harder by the fact that she had to remember that simple gestures humans considered normal might be interpreted as threats by beings whose baseline capabilities were so far below human average. The turning point came 18 days after humanity's initial assessment, during what should have been a routine maintenance cycle for the station's primary systems. Sarah was in her quarters, reviewing diplomatic reports, when the alarm started. Not the assessment center's equipment malfunction alarms, but something deeper and more urgent that made the entire station shudder. Emergency lighting activated, and the gravity fluctuated briefly before stabilizing at slightly lower intensity than normal. The communication panel on the wall activated automatically, and Ambassador Thren's face appeared, though the normally calm diplomat looked distinctly agitated. "All personnel to emergency stations," Thren said. "Reactor containment failure in progress. Non-essential individuals remain in quarters until all clear signal." The panel went dark before Sarah could respond. She moved to the door and found it locked from the outside. Standard protocol for keeping diplomats safe during station emergencies. Through the door she could hear running footsteps and shouted commands in multiple languages, mixing with translation overlays. Someone was screaming about radiation levels, and someone else was yelling for the military response team to deploy to the reactor core immediately. Sarah pressed against the door and listened as the sounds of crisis echoed through the corridor. Webb appeared beside her, then Okafor and Zhang and Patel, all of them drawn by the same instinct to understand what was happening, even though they had no way to help. "Reactor containment failure," Zhang said quietly. "That's catastrophic if they can't stabilize it quickly." "How long do we have if it goes critical?" Okafor asked. "Depends on the reactor type," Patel answered. "But given the size of this station, minutes, maybe less." Sarah made a decision. She moved to the communication panel and activated the emergency override that Ambassador Thren had shown her during the initial orientation. The one meant for diplomatic emergencies if human lives were in danger. "Ambassador Thren, this is Commander Chen," Sarah said when the connection opened. "What's the situation?" Thren's face appeared again, and Sarah could see chaos in the background behind the ambassador. Beings running in multiple directions, displays showing critical alerts in colors that probably meant very bad things. "Containment field collapsed in Reactor 7, Thren said quickly. "Military unit is deploying, but they need time to suit up in radiation protection. And even then, Commander, I cannot discuss this now. Please remain in quarters." "How much radiation are we talking about?" Sarah asked. "Lethal to all known species within 30 seconds of exposure," Thren said. "Our military team can survive approximately 5 minutes with their specialized equipment, but the realignment process requires manual intervention that will take—" Thren paused and looked at something off-screen. "Our engineers estimate 20 to 30 minutes minimum." Sarah felt her mind working through the problem. Lethal radiation exposure, manual intervention required, time constraint that exceeded the maximum safe exposure duration for the station's strongest species, even with protection. "What level of radiation?" Sarah asked again, more specifically this time. "Approximately 40 gray per minute," Thren said, then stopped, and Sarah saw recognition flash across the ambassador's face as it made a connection. "Commander, no, absolutely not. I cannot allow you to." "Earth's background radiation exposure is higher than most worlds in the collective," Sarah interrupted. "We have natural resistance. How much protection can you provide?" "Our radiation suits would reduce exposure to 20 gray per minute," Thren said, and Sarah could hear the conflict in the ambassador's voice between diplomatic protocol and desperate pragmatism. "But even with human resilience, that is still—" Earth's nuclear workers regularly handle environments with similar radiation levels, Sarah said, which was stretching the truth but not by much. We have procedures for this. What needs to be done? Thren disappeared from the screen for a moment, and Sarah heard rapid conversation in multiple languages. When the ambassador returned, Dr. Ven was visible in the background. The containment field needs physical realignment, Thren said slowly. 3 mechanical couplings must be manually rotated to correct positions. It requires significant force and fine motor control. Our military team could do it, but the time required exceeds their safe exposure limit, even with protection. Sarah looked at her delegation. They were all watching her with expressions that ranged from concerned to determined. Send me the technical specifications and unlock this door, Sarah said. Commander Chen, I must protest, Thren began. How many people die if we don't fix this? Sarah interrupted. Thren went silent. The answer was clearly visible in the ambassador's face. Thousands, Thren finally said. Reactor 7 feeds life support for 3 habitat rings. Then unlock the door and tell me where to go, Sarah said. The door clicked open. Sarah stepped into the corridor and found Dr. Ven waiting with a radiation suit designed for the station's largest security species. It would fit poorly, but it would provide some protection. This way, Dr. Ven said. And Commander, thank you. Sarah followed Dr. Ven through corridors that had emptied of all personnel. Emergency bulkheads were sealing sections automatically to contain potential radiation spread, and they had to override 3 lockdowns before reaching the reactor level. The heat hit her first. Reactor 7's cooling systems had failed, along with the containment, and the ambient temperature in the chamber was already approaching 50 Celsius. Sarah felt sweat beading on her forehead inside the radiation suit's helmet, but otherwise the heat was tolerable, well within human operational range, even if it would have been debilitating for most collective species. The radiation detector on her suit began clicking rapidly as they approached the core. Through a thick, transparent barrier, Sarah could see the reactor itself, a massive cylinder of exotic matter contained in fields that shimmered and sparked where the containment had collapsed. 3 mechanical couplings jutted from the reactor housing, each one rotated out of alignment by varying degrees. The problem was obvious even to Sarah's non-engineer eyes. Rotate each coupling clockwise until the indicator lights turn from red to blue, Dr. Ven said through the communication system. The force required is approximately... Dr. Ven paused to check a display. 800 newtons. Our military team would need mechanical assistance. Sarah did quick mental math. 800 newtons was roughly the weight of 80 kilograms under Earth gravity. Significant, but manageable for human strength. How do I access the chamber? Sarah asked. Dr. Ven pointed to an airlock. Sarah entered and felt the radiation level spike as the inner door opened into the reactor core environment. The heat was intense now, pushing 60 Celsius, and the radiation detector's clicking had become nearly continuous. Sarah ignored both sensations and focused on the first coupling. She gripped the mechanical assembly and pulled clockwise. The metal resisted for a moment, then began to move with surprising smoothness once she overcame the initial friction. The indicator light shifted from red to amber to blue as the coupling rotated into correct alignment. The second coupling was tighter, seized by thermal expansion or damaged by the containment failure. Sarah adjusted her grip and pulled harder, feeling her muscles engage properly for the first time since arriving at the station. The coupling groaned and shifted, slowly rotating as she maintained steady pressure until the light changed to blue. The third coupling had partially melted, its surface deformed by heat. Sarah examined it carefully, then gripped the assembly at a different angle to compensate for the irregular surface. This one required the most force, and she felt her arms burning with exertion as she fought the seized mechanism. The coupling finally moved with a sound like tearing metal. Sarah kept pulling, ignored the pain in her shoulders and back, and watched the indicator slowly shift through amber toward blue. When the light turned blue, the reactor's containment field stabilized, with a sound like thunder. Sarah felt the temperature begin dropping immediately as cooling systems re-engaged. She exited the chamber and found Dr. Venn staring at her with all its compound eyes wide. Through the barrier, Sarah could see station personnel beginning to gather, dozens of faces from multiple species, all watching her in silence. Elapsed time, 12 minutes, Dr. Venn finally said. Commander Chen, you just accomplished something our best military team would have required 30 minutes to complete, and you did it without showing signs of severe radiation exposure. Sarah pulled off the radiation suit's helmet and took a deep breath of air that tasted like ozone and heated metal. Earth's background radiation prepared our immune systems, Sarah said, and the physical requirements were well within human capability. Honestly, it wasn't that hard. Dr. Venn made a sound the translator interpreted as amazed laughter. Not that hard, she says, Dr. Venn repeated. Commander, you just demonstrated exactly what the galaxy finds so terrifying and so remarkable about your species. The reactor incident changed everything. Within hours of Sarah's successful containment realignment, the diplomatic channels that had been buzzing with concerns about humanity's dangerous capabilities suddenly filled with messages of gratitude and requests for cooperation agreements. Ambassador Thren visited the human delegation's quarters personally, accompanied by the station's administrator, a floating being that looked like an arrangement of geometric shapes that somehow achieved sentience, and 3 members of the collective's High Council, who had traveled from the central governance worlds specifically to meet humanity face to face. Commander Chen, Thren said with what Sarah had learned to recognize as formal ceremonial tone. On behalf of Station Kepler 442 and the 17,000 beings whose lives you preserved, the collective extends gratitude and recognition of your actions. Sarah felt uncomfortable with the formality. She had done what needed doing, the same as any emergency responder would have back on Earth. But clearly, the aliens saw it differently. I was glad to help, Sarah said simply. Anyone would have done the same. No, Thren replied. Most species would have been physically incapable. Those few who possessed the strength would have died from radiation exposure. You alone had both the capability and the resistance necessary to succeed. The High Council member, who looked like a collection of floating crystals, drifted forward. Its translator harmonics were carefully modulated to avoid the teeth-aching frequencies Sarah had experienced before. The collective has completed analysis of humanity's integration assessment, it said. We have determined a path forward that acknowledges both your unique capabilities and our need for mutual safety. Sarah gestured for the council to continue, while her delegation gathered around to hear the official decision that would determine humanity's place among the stars. First, the crystalline being continued. Humanity will be granted provisional membership status in the Galactic Collective, with full diplomatic recognition and access to standard trade agreements, scientific exchanges, and cultural programs. Sarah felt relief wash through her. Provisional membership was the best outcome they had hoped for, giving Earth time to adapt to galactic society without rushing into full integration. Second, another council member spoke. This one was the tree being from the xenobiology session. Humanity will be classified under special protocols that we are implementing specifically for your species. These protocols include safety guidelines for interaction with other collective members. What kind of safety guidelines? Webb asked, his tone careful. Physical interaction warnings, the tree being explained. Equipment designed for other species will be clearly marked as potentially incompatible with human strength levels. Facilities that cannot accommodate human physiology will require advance notice before visits. Standard furniture and tools will be reinforced in areas where humans regularly travel. This sounded like they were being treated as some kind of hazard that needed special accommodation. "Are we being quarantined?" she asked. "No," Thren said quickly. "You are being integrated carefully. The protocols are designed to prevent accidental harm, both to you and from you, while everyone adjusts to humanity's presence." The floating geometric administrator spoke for the first time, its translated voice flat and precise like a computer. "Consider the alternative," it said. "Without protocols, a human could accidentally crush another being's appendage during what you consider a gentle handshake, or break essential equipment through what you perceive as light touch. These incidents would damage diplomatic relations despite good intentions." Sarah understood the logic, even if she didn't like the implications. Humans were dangerous by accident, and everyone needed to be careful around them. Third, the Crystalline Council member continued, "Humanity is being designated as a Tier 1 strategic resource species." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "It means," Thren explained, "that hostile species who might have considered aggressive action against Earth will now think very carefully before doing so. It means that diplomatic disputes involving humanity will receive priority mediation. It means that the collective recognizes your people as uniquely valuable and worth protecting." "Protected from what?" Okafor asked. "From yourselves, partially," the tree being said. "Your species emerged into galactic society without understanding how unusual you are. Without guidance, you might have been exploited by those who would use your capabilities for warfare or conquest." The geometric administrator's shapes rotated in what might have been an expression. "Already we have intercepted 17 requests from various factions seeking to recruit human mercenaries," it said. 4 attempts to purchase exclusive military alliance with Earth's governments, and 23 proposals for genetic material acquisition that border on unethical research. Sarah felt cold dread settling into her stomach. Humanity had been in space for less than a month, and already other species were trying to weaponize them. "We won't be anyone's soldiers," Sarah said firmly. "We know," Thren replied. "That is precisely why the protective designation exists. It establishes clear boundaries that prevent exploitation, while allowing humanity to develop naturally within galactic society." The council members exchanged what looked like meaningful glances, despite their radically different sensory systems and body structures. "There is one final classification," the crystalline being said, and its harmonics carried something that sounded like amusement. "This is informal, but has already spread throughout station population and diplomatic channels." "What classification?" Sarah asked warily. "The beings of the collective have begun referring to humans as—" Thren paused and made a sound the translator couldn't interpret before continuing. "The term translates approximately as gentle giants, or perhaps friendly behemoths." Webb laughed suddenly, the sound echoing in the quarters. "They think we're friendly?" he said. "They hope you are friendly," Dr. Venn corrected, appearing in the doorway with its usual timing. "The alternative is quite terrifying from our perspective." Sarah thought about this for a long moment. Humanity had dreamed of finding aliens for centuries, imagining wise elder races who would guide them, or at least accept them as equals. Instead, humans were the terrifying newcomers who accidentally broke everything and made others nervous by existing. "So we're the scary species," Sarah said slowly, "the ones everyone else worries about." "You are the unprecedented species," the Crystalline Council member corrected. "The ones who survived where survival should have been impossible, and emerged capable of things we thought required engineering rather than evolution." Over the following weeks, Sarah watched as humanity's integration protocols took shape. Special furniture began appearing throughout the station in areas humans frequented. Benches rated for higher weight limits, door handles reinforced to prevent accidental breaking, equipment with safety warnings written in 12 languages, including English, explaining that these devices were not designed for human strength levels. The handle with care signs appeared everywhere, and it took Sarah 3 days to realize they weren't warnings about humans being fragile. They were warnings about humans themselves, reminders to other species to be careful when humans were present, because the terrifying Death World beings might accidentally cause harm, despite their apparent friendliness. The collective established the Human Integration Office, staffed by xenobiologists and diplomatic specialists, whose job was helping both humans and aliens understand each other without incident. They published guidelines, like appropriate force levels for human-alien interaction, and understanding human emotional expressions, and why humans find pain tolerance amusing. Sarah received daily briefings about various species who wanted to meet humans, study them, learn from them, or sometimes just observe them from safe distances. She attended diplomatic functions where she had to consciously remember to use gentle movements and soft touches, because what felt normal to her registered as threatening to beings whose evolution hadn't required surviving Earth's hostile conditions. Humanity had spent millennia imagining themselves as the underdogs of cosmic civilization, the young upstart species who would need to prove themselves worthy. Instead, they were the final boss that everyone else had nightmares about, the unknowable force that could end conflicts simply by showing up and being casually terrifying. 3 months after the initial assessment, Sarah stood in the observation deck, watching Earth rotate slowly in the viewport. The station had moved to Sol System's outer reaches, establishing orbit that would serve as humanity's primary diplomatic gateway. Webb joined her at the viewport, both of them silent for a long moment. "Did you ever imagine it would be like this?" Webb asked. "No," Sarah admitted. "I thought we'd be the students learning from advanced civilizations. Instead, we're the scary monsters everyone else tells stories about." "We're not monsters," Webb said. "We're not," Sarah agreed. "But from their perspective, we might as well be. We break their equipment without trying, survive conditions that would kill them instantly, and accomplish physical tasks they consider impossible." "So what do we do?" Webb asked. Sarah thought about the question. Earth had 6 billion humans who would eventually want to travel among the stars, meet alien species, explore new worlds, all of them carrying the biological legacy of evolution on a death world that prepared them to be far stronger, tougher, and more resilient than the galactic average. "We learn to be gentle," Sarah said finally. "We learn to understand that what's normal for us is extraordinary for them. We become the species that everyone knows is dangerous, but trusts to be careful." "That's a lot of responsibility," Webb observed. "It is," Sarah agreed. "But that's what comes with being the final boss. You have to be worthy of the role." Back on Earth, humanity was receiving the reports from Station Kepler 442 with mixed reactions. Some people were excited about humanity's unique capabilities, others concerned about the responsibilities, and still others found the whole situation absurd in a way that was quintessentially human. Of course, humanity would accidentally be terrifying to aliens, because humans were excellent at being unexpectedly dramatic. The collective established formal embassies on Earth, choosing locations carefully and reinforcing structures to accommodate alien biology that hadn't evolved under Earth's crushing gravity. Alien diplomats arrived, wearing environmental suits and moving carefully through what they described as heroically dangerous conditions, while humans went about normal daily activities that involved surviving weather, terrain, and biological threats the visitors found nightmarish. Dr. Venn became humanity's primary liaison, the insectoid xenobiologist having developed what it described as professional fascination mixed with personal terror regarding human capabilities. It published papers about human biology that became required reading for anyone planning to interact with Earth's people, and it gave lectures about the importance of being very careful around beings who could accidentally crush you while trying to be friendly. Ambassador Thren helped negotiate Earth's first trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and scientific cooperation treaties. The ambassador became known for the phrase, Yes, humans can do that. And no, they don't consider it unusual, which apparently answered about 70% of questions other species had about human capabilities. Sarah eventually returned to Earth after 6 months on station Kepler 442, carrying the title of humanity's first galactic ambassador and the weight of responsibility that came with representing a species everyone else found simultaneously fascinating and terrifying. She gave speeches about diplomacy and understanding, about being careful with strength and gentle with power, about recognizing that humanity's normal was everyone else's extraordinary. And she watched as Earth's people began to understand their place in the galaxy. Humanity wasn't the underdog of the cosmic story. They were the unexpected twist, the species that evolved in hell and emerged capable of things the rest of the galaxy thought required engineering. They were the living reminder that nature could produce results technology couldn't match, and that survival on the hardest worlds create the strongest people. Sarah stood on Earth's surface and looked up at stars that contained thousands of species, millions of beings, entire civilizations that had never known anything as hostile as Earth. And she smiled, because humanity had finally found their place among them. Not as students or servants, not as warriors or weapons, but as the gentle giants who everyone knew were incredibly dangerous, but trusted to be incredibly careful. The species that survived the unsurvivable and chose kindness over conquest, despite having the capability for either. The human story had reached the stars, and the galaxy would never be quite the same. Sarah's final report to Earth's governments concluded with a simple observation that somehow captured everything. We came to the stars, hoping to find our place among advanced civilizations. Instead, we discovered we're the ones everyone else hopes stay friendly, because the alternative is too terrifying to imagine. And honestly, I think that's exactly the responsibility humanity needed.